Here we are, another week, another book haul. I got some real good stuff. I always say that because, well, that's kind of my thing, is to find good stuff to read. I've been looking for a copy of this book for a while now, basically since I discovered his writing. Look at that cool copy of City by Clifford D. Simek. So City is super cool. It was a fix-up of short stories that was published in 1952. It is about a far distant future Earth where the only things left on the Earth are hyper-intelligent dogs and their robot servants. And it's dogs telling stories about these mythological creatures known as man. And I could not think of anything cooler than that. It's such a cool concept. It's been ranked as like one of the best science fiction, one of the top 10 science fiction books of the 1950s, just all sorts of stuff. And these book club editions, these very, very cool, like late 70s book club editions, I just love. And while this one isn't in the best condition, the price was right. And, you know, the spine's in good shape. It's definitely a readable copy. And it's not like I'd be able to find a first edition for any reasonable price. I'm really excited about City. That is now on my short list of books to read this year. I want to read that very soon. I loved Waystation. It won the Hugo in 1964. And so I cannot wait to get to City. Clifford D. Simek is one of those writers I need to spend more time reading. Every time I read something from him, be it short fiction or a novel, it's just great. Here's something completely different. John Steinbeck's The Acts of King Arthur and His Noble Knights. This thing is fascinating. So John Steinbeck started this in the late 50s. He worked on it for a couple years, and a lot of that time he was living in England, and him and his wife both thought it was some of the best times in their life, was them spending time in England and him working on this. So this is Steinbeck's version of Le Morte d'Arthur. So what it was he took the Winchester manuscript, which I think is the oldest manuscript of Sir Thomas Malory's work, and he brought it up to modern times in the style of writing and storytelling. What he wanted to do was make a contemporary version of Malory's story. And I didn't know about this until very recently, and when I found out about it, I was like, heck yeah, I want to find a copy of that. And then I found this copy for real cheap, so I wasn't going to say no. And what's so fascinating about this is a quote from Steinbeck, and I'll read it right now. Malory wrote the stories for and to his time. Any man hearing him knew every word and every reference. There was nothing obscure. He wrote the clear and common speech of his time and country. But that has changed. The words and references are no longer common property, for a new language has come into being. Malory did not write the stories. He simply wrote them for his time, and his time understood them. And with that, almost by enchantment, the words began to flow. That's kind of his whole motivation for writing this. It's incomplete. He abandoned the manuscript in 1959, and after he passed away, it got published. And I'm just super excited that it exists. And what I find really fascinating is even Steinbeck haters, which, I mean, who's a Steinbeck hater? Even book critics that weren't fans of Steinbeck were like, yeah, this is real good. I couldn't believe that he actually did it. Pretty fascinating. I thought that was cool, so I picked up a copy. I can't wait to get to it eventually. There's an audiobook, and I might check that out just because about 70% of my reading is audio, and it feels like one of those books that would work really well as an audiobook. I have a thing for collecting pulps and older stories. I also have a thing for collecting all of the works from Paizo. And when I found out that Paizo had something called Planet Stories, which was their publishing arm that published fiction, it blew me away. And then just yesterday, I found this bad boy, Battle in the Dawn, by Manly Wade Wellman. And it's the complete stories of Hawk the Mighty. And Hawk the Mighty is Manly Wade Wellman's Barbarian that he wrote in the 30s. It just seems so cool. This one has a cool introduction by David Drake. After finishing John the Balladeer just this week, I love Manly Wade Wellman's writing, and I cannot wait to see what he does with a sword and sorcery style barbarian. It's going to be so cool. Also, he beat out William Faulkner in a mystery short story writing contest, and this wasn't early Faulkner or anything. This was peak Faulkner. He also beat a Pulitzer Prize winning author in that same contest, which is just astounding. I want to dig deeper into that, and I might make a video about it because it's just really, really interesting. Got Cool Barbarian by Manly Wade Wellman. It's match made in heaven. I first read this book when I was 11, and it was like a game changer for me. I'd always been interested in like survival stuff. I'd read Hatchet and stuff like that. And then I went back to the source, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. I cannot believe this book was written in 1719. We're talking about a 305-year-old book, and it's just so good. It holds up so well. It's still easy to read. I mean, I read it when I was 11. This version is fantastic. Look at the illustration. I mean, the book is full of beautiful illustrations, and I'm just so happy to have it. Illustrated by N.C. Wyeth, and it just brings back the memories of my childhood, and I really, really want to read this again. It's been a long time since I read it. A lot of it's still in my head, but you know, it was a great excuse for me to pick up a copy finally. I didn't own one, and I've wanted one for a while, and yet again, I got a good deal because, you know, that's the reason you hunt for books. You're looking for good deals. Books are fun to read, but they're also just as fun to search for. It's a thrill of the hunt. I'm always going to talk about it because that's one of my favorite things. I have a science fiction writer that I've wanted to read for a while now. And funny enough, my mom bought me one of his books, and I was just like, okay. She picked it up randomly for me a few years ago. I had no idea who it was. Turns out it's John Brunner, who's won the Hugo Award for Best Novel, British Science Fiction Awards, all sorts of stuff. A critically acclaimed author from the New Wave era, but not necessarily affiliated with New Wave. He was a British author, but New Wave was like, you're too American for us, bro. Your stories like appeal to Americans. We want funky stuff. He was there during that time, and he wrote about a lot of the same things as the New Wave writers, and he's probably a New Wave writer. But yeah, I got that book a while back, and I was like, and I put it on my shelf, thought I'd get to it eventually, and then I found out how important he is as a writer, and so I picked up this boy. I always look for these. These are those Wings books, and they're just cool collections, and you just get more bang for your buck, man. I got 3 books, Children of the Thunder, The Tides of Time, and The Crucible of Time, and they seem really interesting. John Brunner is one of those on my short list of vintage science fiction writers, so definitely looking forward to that. Speaking of short list of science fiction writers, I found Theodore Sturgeon by Lucy Menger, and what this is a critical analysis of Theodore Sturgeon's writing and how he changed through the years. And Lucy Menger was a writer and critic who contributed to essays on Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. I need to find that. I love that book, and I love books about books. This is going to pair really well with the books you can see right above my head. That long line of white books right there. That is a 13-book complete collection of Theodore Sturgeon's short fiction. So I will be pairing this with those. Looking forward to it. He's going to be one of those projects. It's a long-term project because I'm not going to just read 13 short story collections in one go. What I want to do is kind of jump around, find like his 5 best stories through his career, read this and kind of work through those, and then go back and just start from the beginning and just chip away at that for the rest of my life, because hopefully I got a lot of life left in me and I can spend that enjoying some vintage science fiction short stories. And some of the blurbs in those collections are just astounding. I mean, some of the greatest writers of all time, and they're like, oh no, he is the best. There's no better short fiction writer ever. And I'm like, oh, well, that's some pretty high praise from people like Connie Willis. And this last one, Corum, The Coming of Chaos, is one of the Borealis prints, or it's also White Wolf. They had their they were a tabletop RPG maker, but they had an arm of their company that printed science fiction and fantasy. And this bad boy is number 7, and it leaves me with 6 more Eternal Champion books to find, and I will have the complete collection of Eternal Champion works that were published by them. And that's really cool. That's been something I've been slowly collecting for about a year now, 1.5 years, something like that. So I'm really looking forward to finding the rest of these. It's just part of that hunt, man. The rest of them are a little pricey because it was later in the run when White Wolf was going out of business, so there weren't as many of them printed. Also, I have a few of them in trade paperback, and I kind of want to upgrade them to hardcovers, and that won't be easy either. There's also some stuff that's not on the list that came out. There's 2 collections that are Elric stories written by other writers, which is really cool. They weren't on the list, and I saw another one that was printed by them, and I can't even remember what it was about. It's a Michael Moorcock story, but I don't even know if it was an Eternal Champion story. This was one heck of a book haul. Of course, some of these I'll get to sooner than others. Right now, my priority is going to be Westerns and a handful of other things in June. I might read this Theodore Sturgeon thing sooner than later. I think I need to read some of his short fiction before I read this. It was kind of like the first time I read Wizardry and Wild Romance. I hadn't read enough vintage fantasy. So as I'm reading it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what this stuff means. But when I read it for the second time, it like blew me away because I had read about half of the stuff that Michael Moorcock mentions in it. So I think I need a little context before I read that. This was a great haul. I hope you enjoyed it. I have a ton of book hauls if you want to check them out. I think my next video is going to be my wrap up for May. So look forward to that. Thanks for watching. And with that, I'll see you next time.